This happened only a couple of years ago. I lived alone in a crappy apartment, and I'm sure of all you can relate to the days when you were broke as hell and living in less than desirable places, just so that you could save up enough to get something better. Or maybe while you're waiting on that better paying job, actually. We've all been there, and I had just grown sick of it. I was miserable. My better job had come along in the form of my own business, though. And I had heard of people making a good living from the internet for years, but I never believed it. I thought it was all just hype. I never was one to jump on the bandwagon for anything. I like things that are tried and true. But when the opportunity came along for me to put my college education to use and make money over the internet, I did it. I'm now a web developer and own my own company, Spiderweb Development. It's actually nice to be your own boss. It's even nicer to work from home. But if you're going to work from home, be sure you at least like your home, or it'll drive you nuts. And that's why I had grown so sick of the old apartment. Stephanie, my girlfriend, helped me look for another place to live. I think we looked at every available trailer in every location in the county, and I'm certain we looked at small houses inside and outside the county. Hey, just because I own my own company doesn't mean I have an endless supply of money. I'm still in what I would call the honeymoon stage with the online business. I'm working hard to grow the company. I make a substantial amount of money annually. Not enough, however, to just go wild and rent the biggest, baddest place around. I'm saving up for my future, too. Besides, I haven't come across any property that just screams, buy me. And I'm not sure where I want to settle. Anyway, Stephanie found an apartment building on the outskirts of my town, which was a plus for me because there was little noise to deal with while I worked. The building was an old red brick building, just kind of sitting out by itself by a seldom used side road. When we pulled into the parking lot, I had some serious doubts. The building looked way older than the one I was living in already. And when she saw the doubt in my face, well, Steph laughed and told me to live a little. Go in and at least see what was available. Now, she's the adventurous one in the relationship. She said the place was definitely tried and true, as we walked to the battered-looking industrial metal doors at the entrance. Tried and true, I scoffed. Not war-torn and abandoned. I cupped my hands to the glass and peered inside. Stephanie slapped my arm, muttering under her breath, and told me to stop it. We went inside, and I will admit that I was shocked at how nice the place was. She rang for the manager. A man in his 50s appeared from a back room and approached us, smiling. He introduced himself as Mr. Hanson. He had thick glasses and silver streaks in his hair. He was friendly, but something just felt off about him. He made me uneasy for some reason. Stephanie seemed to have no such problems with him, though. She talked and just breezed right through the small talk with him as we went up to the second floor. There were 6 units and only one was occupied. The tenant was an older man, according to Mr. Hanson. He unlocked apartment 204 and ushered us inside. The apartment was new. The paint was new. Hell, I think even the furniture was new. All the appliances in the kitchen were new enough that I couldn't tell they had ever been used. Stephanie oohed and awed her way through the place while I looked under the pretty veneer for something wrong. Did the new paint on the ceiling conceal the rings from a water leak? Was the new carpet or tile just a ruse to keep us from noticing a weak spot in the floor? Did the nice bathroom cabinet hide leaky pipes and mold? After about 20 minutes of searching, I came away scratching my head. I asked several times what the catch was. To be in that condition, the rent should have been much, much higher. Mr. Hanson assured me that the price he quoted me was indeed correct. 30 minutes later, all the paperwork was filled out. 3 days later, I was moving into my new apartment. I had more room, which I liked. I had a small room that I used for an office, so my workspace and my living space were no longer in the same room. The view from any of my windows was a vast forest. The property butted up to Cherokee National Forest on 2 sides, so there was little to distract me while I worked. And the place being empty, except for me and one other tenant, was great. Steph said I should enjoy it while it lasted because rent that low would definitely bring in other tenants soon. I lived there for 3 or 4 weeks before I got settled enough to be really productive at my work. But that's also when I started feeling strange about the place. There were no new tenants, and that I had noticed, no prospective tenants had even dropped by. So I couldn't even blame the feeling on new neighbors. Steph told me it was probably going to take some time for me to adjust to the quietness and solitude of the place. I agreed and said no more. For a while, that didn't make the feeling any less substantial and real to me, though. As I sat at my desk working, I got the distinct feeling of someone staring at me from behind. The feeling overwhelmed me and I couldn't concentrate. The fine hairs on my neck prickled and my skin tingled in anticipation of a touch that never came. A few times I got up, I abandoned my work and searched every inch of the room from ceiling to floor. I was certain there was a peephole somewhere, or one of those tiny hidden spy cameras. There was nothing, though. After a couple of weeks of that, I took my laptop into the bedroom and started working from there. The feeling of being watched never stopped, though. It didn't matter which room I was in. I could feel someone's intense gaze roving over me. Except when Stephanie was there, and she never complained about it at all. In fact, she loved the place. The only thing that kept her from moving into the building was her lease. She still had almost a year left at her apartment, though the feeling of being watched persisted and was worse on some days. I learned to live with it. Doing as Stephanie suggested, I put it down to being in a new place, an isolated, eerie, quiet place. Then, the footsteps at night started. At first, it was the creaking of floorboards out in the hallway while I was working. I would get up and check it out, but nobody was ever there. I put it down to an old building settling on its bones when the temperature shifted one way or the other. Fall was passing into winter, and it was cool outside during the day. But when the sun dropped, the temperature did as well. But let me tell you, there's nothing like hearing footsteps in your bedroom, in the middle of the night, and seeing nothing to make the sounds. The first time it happened, I was just about to doze off, and I heard a loud creaking noise. It startled me and I sat up, sure that someone had stepped on the threshold board that squeaked loudly under my weight every time my foot happened to fall on it. Immediately, I sat up, staring at the open doorway. Another drawn-out creak from the floor, as if someone took a step in my direction. A cold chill settled over my body and my skin tightened. And another softer creak, closer still. I rubbed my eyes and slapped my cheek to make sure I wasn't dreaming. There was nothing there. I felt like someone was there. You can tell if you're sharing space with another person, and I definitely felt that I was. It didn't matter that I couldn't see him or her. Another step and the floorboard groaned softly under the carpet. And the next thing I knew, I was standing by the bedside table and the lamp was on. My chest burned as I panted for breath, and fear heightened my senses and every sound was loud in my ears. I bet I could have heard a pin drop on the other side of town. Actually, fear is too gentle for what I felt as I stared at my empty room. It was more like terror. I didn't sleep any more that night, and the next day was hell as I tried to work. Every noise made me jump. I spent more time checking behind me and out in the hallway than I did working. Stephanie couldn't come over that evening, so it was a prolonged day of tweaking out every time something made a noise. Unlike the feeling of being watched, the sound of someone walking in my bedroom was nothing I could just get used to or brush off as nerves. No, it was something horrible and scary. I'm a man, but I had zero courage when it came to that. I was sick with fear a lot of nights, and the only thing I learned was that the footsteps would stop once they reached the foot of my bed. They never got closer, and they always walked at the same slow, creeping pace. It's like a mountain lion stalking prey, ready to pounce. Thankfully, the pounce never happened. When it was time to take a trip or visit a new client and set up his account, I was more than ready. I was absolutely thrilled at the prospect of staying in a hotel for a few days, anywhere away from the apartment to give me a break and maybe hit the reset button on my nerves. I stayed an extra day and night in the hotel a few towns away. When I checked out, I felt refreshed, and I was actually looking forward to going back to the apartment and proving to myself that everything wasn't as bad as it had seemed. There were logical explanations for all of it. But I knew something was terribly wrong before I even opened the door. Things were missing. My personal things, my books, DVDs, flat-screen television, rugs, throw pillows, dishes, pots, pans, bed linens, and clothes were all piled in my bathroom. Everything was piled in my bathroom. I can't even describe the fear and confusion running through me as I stared at all my things in there. Nothing had been broken. It had all been stacked precariously into the tub and on the floor, on top of the toilet and on the sink. One wrong move could send it all tumbling helter-skelter over the room and break a lot of my things. Now, Mr. Hansen had no answers. I had the only key to my unit. He assured me that. I took pictures and sent them to Stephanie. Always seeing the bright side of things, she said at least I hadn't been robbed or vandalized. She hypothesized that it was just pranksters, probably bored teenagers living out in the sticks with nothing better to do. Don't ask me why, but I just put everything back to rights. I didn't call the cops. The next day, I did change the doorknob and the deadbolt, though. Now, that evening, I closed the cabinet door in the bathroom for the third time before I squatted down to check the catch. Every time I closed it, I would come back and find it open again. I made a mental note to replace the door's little latch and left it at that. The next morning, I replaced it. That evening, Steph came over and we cooked dinner together. It was a relaxing evening, or it should have been. I tried to relax, but I couldn't. The unseen presence seemed stronger and more malevolent than ever. Not to mention, it was the first time it had ever lingered while my girlfriend was there. She said she felt nothing, but several times I noticed her rubbing her arms and hugging herself as if she'd gotten a chill. Now, usually we had some fun in the bedroom when she was there, but not that night. She said she just wanted to watch a movie and cuddle. I acted crestfallen and put my shot-down face on as she chose a movie. But the truth is that I wasn't really in the mood either. Not with that other presence floating around. Stephanie lived 45 minutes away then, and I knew she had an important business meeting the next morning and that she would leave earlier than normal. I held her tight as I half-watched the movie. I didn't want her to leave. And yes, I was totally hanging on to her like a little kid hangs on to his favorite blanket. But when she ready to leave, I kissed her, told her I loved her, and hid the fear until she was gone. Walking into the bathroom, I closed the cabinet door again. And then I started to change into my joggers for the night. While I changed, the cabinet door eased open again. My gut nodded as I watched it move slowly to a certain point and just completely stop. Now, gathering courage, I checked the new latch. As I messed with the door, an icy gust of wind ran up my back and I yelped in surprise, jumping to my feet. Quickly, I pulled on my t-shirt and went into the living room. I sat in a chair with my back to the wall so that I could see the entire room. After a few minutes, I turned on a football game and muted the volume. As I sat there, I heard the distinct click of the bathroom cabinet opening again. Dread washed over me, but I sat there stubbornly, willing myself to be calm and rational. Finally, I forced myself up and out of the chair. I walked through every room just to prove my overheated imagination that I was indeed alone. I kept repeating that there's no such thing as ghosts, as if by repetition I could make it so. The walkthrough calmed my nerves. It probably helped that I left on all the lights too. And it probably helped that I left on all the lights too. I went back to the living room and sat and watched my football game. I turned the volume on low and tried to concentrate on the game and nothing else. Amazingly, it worked. Before I knew it, I was rooting for my team loudly and booing when the other team scored. I flopped back against the couch hard and gave the opposing team a double thumbs down when they scored again. And a woman's scream tore through the building, and I nearly fell off the couch to the floor. And suddenly, all the fear and dread I had gotten rid of came back and landed on me like a ton of bricks. The woman screamed again, and the scream was getting closer to my unit. Panic took over, and my thoughts flew in different directions. What to do? Call the cops? From the sound of her scream, that would take too much time. She sounded as if she were being stabbed to death. The scream ripped through the hallway and set my teeth on edge. It sounded familiar. My heart stopped beating as one name ran through my mind, blotting out all thought. Stephanie. The scream was just outside the door as I stood, and then she was pounding on my door, screaming at the top of her lungs. There were no words, just that B-movie, scream queen cry of pain and horror. The wall by the door shook hard enough to knock down a picture. I launched myself at the door and yanked at the knob. The door didn't budge. In my panic, I had forgotten about the newly installed deadbolt. She screamed again, but the sound started to fade back down the hallway as I fumbled the lock open. I yanked the door open, but the chain lock at the very top caught and the door rebounded as I yelled for Stephanie. The scream faded too quickly. As I finally mastered the chain lock and opened the door, the scream had faded to nothing. It was as if someone turned the volume down quickly on a radio. There was a single small white tennis shoe lying just outside my door. There was nothing else in the hallway, not even a shadow of a retreating person down the corner. Nothing. No sound, no scream, no girl. It was alone except for that shoe. My instinct told me to pick it up. I snatched it up, and for the life of me, I couldn't recall what kind of shoes Stephanie had worn earlier. Dialing her number, I stepped back inside the apartment and shut the door. I moved to the window, cursing under my breath at each unanswered ring of her phone. I peered down at the parking area and saw nothing but a stray cat sidling under a car. The apartment was so quiet, it hurt my ears. Stephanie answered. The slight annoyed tone of her voice was welcome. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was fine but didn't want to drive with the cell phone screwed into her ear. She was almost home. She said she would call me back as soon as she was there. I called the cops. They did a thorough search of the entire building but found absolutely nothing. And they looked at me as if I might be crazy. The deputies gave me smirks but wasted no time leaving when it was over. They told me they would keep the shoe and let me know if anything came from it. I knew nothing ever would. Just like in my heart, I knew they wouldn't find anything when they searched the place. And I can't tell you what was there or what exactly was going on in my apartment, but I can tell you that I left there the next day. I stayed with Stephanie for a week while I found another place, and then I broke the lease, happily paying the remainder to Mr. Hansen in cash. I can also tell you that I've never before, or since, experienced such terror.